which is not necessarily alphabetical, but would you like to kick us off and then popcorn over to our next panelist?
Yeah, no problem. Very happy to. But yeah, thank you so much for having me here. Nice to see you all. Yeah, so I guess, well, I'll start with my role and then I'll go back into my kind of linguistics background a little bit. So I work for a consultancy called Carbon Limiting Technologies. We're based in London, and I guess I represent the B in your acronym. Was that business? So yeah, we are a small consulting firm that handles problems related to new climate technologies, low carbon technologies. So you might have heard of, yeah, well, I'm sure you've heard of, solar panels and wind turbines. But we deal with problems related to all kinds of things. There's, thousands of other, examples of low carbon technologies. And there is a lot of interest in the business world of making those companies developing those technologies get to market and grow and help reduce emissions in the world. So yeah, that's the company that I work at, and I can speak on what I do a little bit more later. But my linguistics background started at Pomona College, and my friend Rebecca is also here. We did the same linguistics degree at Pomona and the Claremont colleges. And yeah, I was just fell in love with it, and really liked syntax and semantics and phonology. Those were three favorite things. And from there, I was lucky enough to go on to do a master's in linguistics at the University of Cambridge, and then promptly pivoted away into a job like many linguists have. So yeah, I think that's the basic background. That's not quite 5 minutes. Is there anything you think I should talk on more, Anna?
I always love to hear like a detail, like a moment at work. Can you think about a project you're working on right now? Take us to a moment in your day.
Yeah, absolutely. So I get to work on a lot of projects, which is great, but they all kind of boil down to the same kind of things. Making PowerPoints and emailing people for information to put into those PowerPoints, and talking to people on the phone for more information to put into those PowerPoints.
Amen.
And yeah, and then making the pretty graphs to go into the PowerPoints. So yeah,
The
it all
research
kind of
data.
yeah, it's a lot of research, and a lot of just like studying linguistics, it's looking for patterns and data. So today I was working on a project for the UK government, which sounds fancier than it is, about a specific type of heat recovery technology for big factories to reuse heat rather than burn fuel to make heat. And so part of my day was trawling through tons and tons of documents that the UK government has on emissions in different sectors. So I had to learn what sector codes are and find the manufacturing ones, and then go to a corresponding spreadsheet on their convoluted website. It's actually a very good website. And yeah. So that was a part of my day today.
Thanks for that. And would you popcorn to our next?
Oh yeah. I'll get Rebecca's next in line, so I'll go to you.
Oh boy. Thanks so much, Jackson. Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca, and I work for the Walden Group, which is I also represent the B in the acronym. I work as a marketer and brand content producer for a logistics firm, a rather large one in Paris. Basically, my day-to-day is doing pretty much anything you could imagine marketing has in store, which means I do a lot of market research. I put together marketing plans. I write content. I schedule photo shoots. I produce videos. I do interviews with people. I produce reports. I produce ads. I do a lot of things. But my linguistics background, I did linguistics and French at Pomona College, same linguistics program as Jackson. And then I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, so I just sort of launched myself into business. You can tell I didn't know what I want to do with my life because I wrote down every job that I've had, and I'll just read the list. I was a behavioral therapist for a minute, supporting kids with autism. Then I was an English teacher to French adolescents, and then I was an independent linguist. By that I just mean I trained AI for a while. And then I was an English trainer for professionals. So I taught like people who worked in professional settings how to have professional business English. And then I worked as an executive assistant to a woman who had multiple different businesses on Martha's Vineyard. And then I got into what I currently do, which is logistics marketing. And Anna Marie, I know that I don't technically qualify for this, but most of our business is healthcare logistics. So I do have a little bit of healthcare background in there. So if you have questions about that, I could try to answer, maybe.
I have to tell you something funny. So I wrote a book called Bringing Linguistics to Work, and I self-published that one. And when you self-publish, there are all these firms that try to reach out to you and see if you want to, give the book to them, and they'll package it and market it for you. And 9 times out of 10, they say, are you the author of Bringing Logistics to Work? And that's how I know that it might not be a linguist that I'm talking to.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
feel like I am very much steeped in the logistics world, not at all. Thanks for being here, Rebecca. Who are you going to popcorn to?
Let's go to Daniel.
All right, thank you. So hi, everyone. I'm Daniel. If you can't see me, I'm a middle-aged white person with an asymmetric haircut, pierced right eyebrow, and I'm dressed in orange. I am coming to you from my home office in Washington, D.C., and I live my professional life, I was just saying, at the intersection in the Venn diagram that includes sociolinguistics, applied anthropology, education, and nonprofit management. I really love Rebecca's story about the nonlinear career pathway, because so I also started off as a teacher of English to speakers of other languages. I taught at community-based nonprofits. I was funded by the US government to spend a year in former Yugoslavia teaching at a university. I was at a public high school here in the US for a few years. And then I moved from that into language testing and materials development. And then I went back to school for my PhD in linguistics at Georgetown, which is where I met Anna Marie. And I sort of moved along that trajectory from teaching English as a second language to applied linguistics to sociolinguistics to linguistic anthropology. My PhD thesis was a linguistic ethnography of 2 math classrooms. But also around the time I was finishing up, I realized that my main professional goal for various personal reasons was to not move after I finished, which DC is a good place for that. There are a lot of nonprofit and government jobs for people with PhDs here. And so what I ended up doing was I got a job at the American Anthropological Association, which is like the US counterpart of the Royal Anthropological Institute, if you're familiar. And I started there as a postdoc doing research on the profession of anthropology. But mostly what I did, I was there for 8, almost 9 years. And I did a lot of service design and evaluation and program management. would be the sort of businessy words that I would use for it, around a lot of professional development programming for anthropologists, around outreach to middle and high school students and teachers, around association governance. And then, so I was one of the people that was sort of hinted at as being in transition. They let me go in November. So I've been on the job market for 2 weeks now. And I can talk a little bit about how that's going. But one thing that it's been, and this is going to lead me to my linguistic moment that Anna Marie asked for. One thing that I've been doing during my time as an unemployed person is I've been doing some sort of pro bono consulting for my synagogue. I am on the board of the synagogue that I belong to, and we are still very conservative about our COVID policy. All of our events are mask required. And so we decided that it was time to do some community consultation and see if that's still working for us. And we've done surveys and focus groups and one-to-ones and interviews with key stakeholders and co-design sessions and collaborative participatory policy making. And we have come to the point where we have to like propose that we're going to do a thing, which is scary. It's terrifying as hell. But so I was meeting with the synagogue director, who's kind of like the CEO of a nonprofit. And she said, you know, I feel like it needs to be specific what we're going to do. I don't want to be fighting about this over and over. I don't want to be relitigating it. And I said to her, so are you thinking of it as a fight? Are you thinking of it as a lawsuit? Because linguist brain picked up on the metaphor. And I said to her, how might we reframe it to be something that is a little bit less agonistic? And so that was my moment of linguistics just this week. I will popcorn it over to Kate.
Thanks very much, Daniel. I'm Kate. I'm also a middle-aged white person, and I'm distinct from Daniel in that my hair is not asymmetrical, and I've got a red sweater on. I'm really glad to be following Rebecca and Daniel, because I will tell you that my career trajectory was to be a hanger-on for a really long time. I wanted to be a professor of linguistics, and I wanted that basically thanks to my cousin. I did an undergraduate degree in philosophy and religion, and I thought, I don't really want to teach philosophy or religion, so I'm not quite sure what I'm doing with my life. And my wonderful cousin did a degree in applied linguistics and said, hey, dude, you got to look at this. It's great. And shout out to my cousin, Deborah. I went and looked at linguistics and said, oh yeah, this is the thing. Did a master's degree in it to really check that it was what I wanted to do. And after the master's degree said, for sure, I'm all in. Did a PhD looking at sign languages and how they arise in rural contexts where kids don't have access to a deaf school. So they're not getting language transmission from deaf adults who are signers, and what happens when they develop a sign language in that context. And then really dug in and did a postdoc looking at how hearing people's gestures are a part of the language ecology that's in that setup, because you can talk about it as though these sign languages emerge from nothing. And in fact, you'll read a lot of literature that says these sign languages are amazing. They offer you an incredible window into the brain because they arise from nothing. And that's not true. They actually arise in contexts where lots of hearing people are gesturing and interacting, and what they're doing doesn't look like language. And then really remarkably, what the brain does contribute is some structure that gets them looking more like language. So I worked on that, and I worked on the hearing gesturer side of it for a while. And also touching on what Daniel described, what's the job that's available if you've got a PhD in this and you've been working in Mexico? And the answer is looking at the same phenomenon, but with Bedouin signers in the north of Israel. So I moved the first time to Israel. And then what's the job after that? And it was working with a data science team that really wants to dig into the details about the gestural side of it in Sweden. So I moved to Sweden. And then after that, still didn't have a lot of faculty jobs coming open doing what I wanted to do. And I realized, oh, hang on, okay, I've done a master's and a PhD and 2 postdocs, and I'm still not landing that faculty job. And I looked at the numbers and saw that that faculty job might not exist. One came out in the year that I was really having this struggle, and I got a letter back that said, of the people with your subspecialization, over 400 have applied. And I just, yeah, Daniel, I wish your volume were on because you're laughing. And I am now at the place of laughing. At the time, I fell out of my chair and I stayed on the ground for a bit. And then I said, okay, cool. My family's moving to London. And the week that we moved to London was the week that the university I was really interested in fired all of their adjunct faculty and said that their department was reducing in size. And I went, that's a message. So I looked around for what I could do. I'd spent forever thinking about deafness and sign language in communicative contexts that are a little bit different and a little bit funky because there isn't always a standard as the sign language is developing. So you're doing a lot of problem solving around language. And I started working for an agency. Oh, I did this all backwards. Sorry, I did the whole history. And here's what I do. I work in a consultancy that helps companies to make their products and services work better for people with sensory loss. So primarily deafness. I also work on blindness and sight loss. And so a lot of the day-to-day work, I have left agency work. I'm doing some freelance consultancy. So I'm with you there, Daniel, that I'm in a transition. But to give you one example of something that I've done recently that was still with the agency, I worked with the Royal National Institute for Blind People. They do survey after survey where they find that something like 96% of blind and partially sighted people feel that they are limited in the public transport options they can choose in the UK because there's something about it that's inaccessible. And it was a really fun project because for the first time, we turned that number on its head and said, hold on, hang on, doesn't that mean that 4% of blind and partially sighted people think there's no problem for them on the public transport system in the UK? What is happening? So the project expressly was to ask really intrepid travelers, like, would you be willing to go to a place you haven't been before and probably get lost? And then show us why it is that you feel really confident to get yourself unlost, because we're trying to learn what's working for you and see if that's generalizable. So I got lost all over Glasgow and Edinburgh and Newcastle and London and Brighton with unbelievably adventurous blind travelers who would say, you can throw anything at me, I'm pretty good at getting unlost. And we wrote up a paper with RNIB to explain what's generalizable about that. So I think I've hit 5 minutes, but I was in it to win it, where it was a professorship. There was no it to win. And I went into consultancy and I really, really like it.
Love it.
Popcorn.
You can popcorn to Pearl or to
Pearl.
Anthony.
Yeah, Pearl.
Hello, my name is Pearl. I have debated how I should describe this story, but I'll just throw it out there first. Now I work for the British Council, and I'm an emerging researcher and data analyst in a team called English Language Research, and we do research in language testing. So I'm kind of getting back to language, but then this is actually not my first job after the PhD. So it's a bit of a back forward now to when I started. I am originally from Hong Kong and get my teacher's registration there as well. So I used to teach secondary school students in Hong Kong, teaching English there. And I taught for 2 years, and I knew that this is not a job for me. I cannot see myself doing it for 20 years of for my career. And went to London to do my applied linguistics master's, and then stayed for the PhD. And it was during the final year of my PhD that I started looking at jobs and postdocs. And it's just as Daniel says, that I realized that I really love London. I'm not going to move anywhere. But if you want to land into an academia job, it's not that you can choose a location, it's the location who chooses you. So I was struggling a little bit. But there was a postdoc available somewhere in the UK that I thought I might suit the job. So I tried. And again, as what Kate said, the competition was very intense. And because I have not finished my PhD and I'm competing with people who have finished and probably have a couple of postdocs, so obviously I didn't get it. And after that, I really started thinking, what do I actually want to do? Do I actually really want to be in academia? And the answer was, I actually don't really want to be in academia. And especially in this current environment, like the higher education environment in the UK, it's just not something that I want to be in. Then I thought really hard and say, so what actually do I want to do? Then I remember when I was doing my PhD, I really needed help with statistics and quantitative data. So where applied linguistics, back then when I was a PhD student, belongs to the Faculty of Social Sciences. And because we don't offer any statistics course, and I said, but I really needed help. So they put me into a statistics course that was run by the Department of for Politics. So I was with a lot of politics students there. So I did an introductory course and an intermediate course. And by the end of the intermediate course, the introductory course says, we need a PhD as a teaching assistant. Can you do it? Okay, sure, I can do it. So I had a year teaching politics master students basic statistics. And that was when I was in touch with social sciences databases and how to do quick analysis, getting big data set and things. So I thought, if I get a job that works with data, I would probably be very happy. So actually, my first job was Office for National Statistics at the UK government, and I was in data management. So all of these industry code that Jackson was saying, yes, I know what they are. And from there, I was given a chance to do a 10-week crash course on coding in Python, and it happens to really transfer to my current job now at the British Council. So I really would describe this as a linguistics moment of me in the British Council, because now I'm back to languages research, but then also working with big testing data. It's kind of marrying my linguist side and my data side here.
I love it.
I don't know
And
which
Dan-
industry do I belong to, because I do have government
Yeah.
and I have data, and British Council is a registered charity, so it's not.
Well, that's the whole point of my Brighton, is to break down. I mean, I made buckets just to collapse them. My professor, Deborah Schifrin, said that there are lumpers and splitters in this world, and I only split so that I can lump. I'm a lumper through and through. Anthony, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
Yay! Hello.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Meso, and I currently work as a gallery assistant in a museum in central London. The museum is called National Portrait Gallery. But just before I go into a bit more detail about that, I'll just give you my academic background and what I did in the past. So I did my first degree, my undergraduate degree, in architectural technology, and that's basically architect's assistant. So I worked in 4 architect firms, and I found it a bit too repetitive. I didn't really like it as much, and I also tried working in other industries, like healthcare, things like that. Then eventually I got a job in a museum. So I've been at this museum for 8 years, and I worked for 6 years, and then the museum closed for 3 years whilst they were doing building work. So this was in 2020, and then when the museum closed, they reopened in 2023. So whilst the museum was closed, I did my master's in linguistics. Actually, I'll just say my undergraduate was at Northumbria University, architectural technology. That's in the northeast of England. So that's I did that, and then my master's, my postgraduate was in linguistics, and it was at SOAS, School of Oriental and African Studies. So that's the University of London, and I'm based in London now. So I did that between 2021 and 2022, and I was really interested in the research element of things, and I started going to conferences online and also in-person conferences. But then when I got my, and I wanted to go on and do a PhD, but when I got my mark, I got a pass, and some supervisors were saying that it'd be a bit difficult to do a PhD if you didn't get a merit, because you'll have to be self-funded. So that kind of put me off a bit. And then I went back so I didn't know what to do. The gallery reopened in 2023. I went back there, and I continued to work as a gallery assistant. And what draws me to the job is the research element. So I've been there for 8 years, and the main part of the job are visitors coming and asking questions about history and about art. And we've got tablets, and we give them information. So I still attended conferences after finishing my degree. So I was going to conferences all over the world. I presented in one of the conferences I went to, mainly linguistics, but sometimes language conferences, follow-up conferences. So I presented, and my research is on Dholuo phonology. Dholuo is my heritage language. It's a language from Kenya. I'm a Kenyan. So that's the language I did research on. And also another project that I'm doing is creating a monolingual Dholuo dictionary. So that's more lexicography than linguistics, but that's like a project that I'm doing now. So I'm doing a word list now, and I've got a friend who's a linguist, and she's based in Kenya. She's also Dholuo is also a heritage language, so she'll help me with definitions later on when I'm ready. And so I'm putting these projects together. But what I'm interested in now is to try and get into research administration. So I'm looking to go to conferences, looking to start something research related in the gallery that I'm working in, and then just being a moderator there. And yeah, so I'm just interested in that whilst I'm doing the lexicography project. So in terms of linguistics, I'm looking to do something related with research in linguistics. I'm not sure exactly what, but I'm just interested in being in that environment of conferences and doing given papers and moderating. So that's what I'm interested in at the moment.
I love it. That brings me to my present moment. I'm here at the Linguistics Society. Well, it hasn't started yet. This afternoon, the Linguistics Society of America conference will begin. And it's my first time being at a conference in years. So I'm excited to take it all in. So I would love if people have questions, if they would pop it in the chat or, raise your hand. I'll ask for my LAGB team to help me keep an eye out for questions and hands and raised. And I'll start off with one question, maybe to kick things off. And to the panelists, don't feel like everyone has to answer every question. Answer if you feel like it. Ask one another questions. We should feel free to feel very free to be free form. I think that's the best kind of conversation. So jump in and get to know one another too. But I guess a question that I really like is, what is something that surprised you? And I realize I didn't send that on my list of possible questions. I'm not meaning to surprise you now, but I do like that question. I mean, when our attendees maybe are thinking about, preparing themselves for a career, their first, their second. There's a panel I'm going to be going to that's about your second career after academia. I think that's a theme that's coming up. And Daniel, our friend Mackenzie Price, is going to be one of the panelists on that on Sunday. So what's something that surprised you when you made the move into the world of work? I can say to me, I'll answer my own question quickly. So maybe I should give a thumbnail sketch of my career. When I graduated, I was on the academic job market for 3 years and was a finalist only for jobs in the UK, as it turned out. Only folks in the UK could make sense of my improvisational theater training and could see that was linguistics. And in every case, I didn't have the job, so I didn't lose it. The job was given to the perfect person, and I couldn't deny it. In every case, the perfect person was up for it, and they got it. And sometimes that's how it goes. So my first job out of academia was actually in academia. I ran a professionally oriented master's program for 6 years. And then I started writing a book called Bringing Linguistics to Work. And as I was writing that book, I was talking about, linguists can go anywhere and do anything. And then I realized I was in academia saying this big story about go anywhere and do anything. So I say that I wrote myself out of academia, and I went to go work at a think tank in Washington, D.C. And the thing that surprised me there was it turned out my counterparts at almost every institution had PhDs. They were in, one of my first projects was with the National Geographic. Do they call themselves a museum? Now I can't remember. National Geographic Institution. And it was a team, the education department, all PhDs. And I was just like, what had I've been sitting there thinking that all the PhDs worked in academia, and it was patently false. That assumption was wrong. Very, very, very wrong. So that was something that surprised me when I left. I always put left academia in scare quotes because I still don't think that I've left. It keeps bringing me back in. Anyone else have something that surprised them?
I've got a story I can share. This is Daniel. Oh, but I see somebody raise their hand properly, so I can.
It was me.
Oh.
I meant to say mute.
So I wouldn't. My first job outside of academia was my first job. So I was a career changer, and my first academic job was PhD school. I believe that PhD school is an academic job. As a doc student, especially as a PhD candidate in the US, you have years of coursework, and then you have a proposal accepted for what your thesis will be. And at that point, you're researching and you're teaching, and I was doing service to the profession. It's basically like an academic job, except that the wages are abysmal and there's no chance of promotion. But so one thing, my previous career as a classroom teacher, and then also being a doc student and having that kind of academic experience, one thing that they had in common that I didn't even realize that they had in common until I did something else is that they are very you do everything yourself. If you need to do something that you don't know how to do, then you learn how to do it, and then you do it, right? That's what PhD school is you learn entirely new bodies of research, entirely new methods and theories and approaches with minimal supervision in a very restricted time frame. And that is a skill, but it's also maladaptive. And the way that I figured this out is I was in my first role at the association as a postdoc, and I decided that this data set that I was working with would really benefit from having some interactive data visualizations on our website. And so I spent probably 2 weeks trying to teach myself JavaScript so that I could make the interactive data visualization. And our CFO was sort of bopping down the hall one day and stuck her head in my office and said, "What are you working on?" And I told her, and she said, "You have a budget. If you need that, you can pay someone who knows how to do it." And my head exploded. That would never have occurred to me, that I could ask someone to do a thing because I don't know how. But in every other industry in the world, that's how it works. And so learning to work collaboratively has been really healthy for me and also really difficult. But it has been basically constant in everything I've done other than teaching and being a PhD student.
Anthony.
Yeah, in terms of what surprised me, because I got the experience of working in a museum before doing my linguistics degree and after, and just the many ways that it can be applied to my job. So one of my roles is to make sure that the captioning for the paintings and the artwork is correct, and it makes, and I was kind of applying that to. I was applying, just looking at the captioning, just to how it would make sense in the context and what kind of caption or what the curator was trying to say, and having that discussed. So I just, because I didn't think that was to do with linguistics. I thought linguistics was more analysis and research, was about something like that. Yeah, so that's really surprised me about having, because I see things from a different perspective.
Carl, and then Kate.
Anna Marie, you stole my first point. I was about to say, yeah, I was surprised by how many of my colleagues in both of my jobs have a PhD and that they chose to go into industry. instead of staying. So when I first started, it's always a good conversation starter of like, well, why did you leave then? But also was echoing with what Daniel was saying about collaboration. It's the same with my job that yes, we do have a bit of budget. If we don't have the expertise, we can ask for a professor. We can collaborate and pay a small consultancy fee on their expertise on the literature and the field and stuff. But I think for me, the collaboration was also a surprise, but in a different way. I think both of my jobs made me realize that doing a PhD was a very lonely job, if you can call it, because this is your project. You are the only expert in your project. Your supervisor, if you're lucky, is very supportive, and he or she might also be part of the expert, but ultimately you are the only one and you're the only one responsible. This has never happened to me in the jobs that I am the only person responsible. It's always a teamwork, it's always a team responsibility. So I felt, okay, I'm still doing research, but I felt I can breathe a bit more because I'm no longer the single person responsible anymore. And there are more discussions and stuff. So I'm like, okay, it's actually more collaborative after the PhD.
Thank goodness, eh? Kate?
Yeah, I really feel you on this one, Pearl. The thing that was surprising to me was I thought of myself as a kind of one-stop shop, that I would do all of the things. And I thought that the value that I brought to an organization was being able to do all of the things. And because I was subspecialized in research about originally American Sign Language and then later a sign language of Mexico, I felt like I was in the wrong place to be making a contribution, because here I am in London and I'm a very baby BSL signer. I'm a very early BSL signer. So I'm not going to be having a rich and serious conversation in BSL. And it became really clear over time that what I needed to be doing was helping to shape the parameters around the way focus groups worked at all. So only hearing people think that hearing people are necessary for deaf people to have a conversation with each other. So hearing people will create a focus group for deaf people and be like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a hearing person lead it, and then we're going to have an interpreter. And then they're going to interpret back and forth for all the deaf people in this room, even though it's an entirely deaf panel, right? And so it turned out that what I really needed to do was just jump in and say, we need a skilled deaf facilitator who signs BSL. I can get you one of those. And then we just step back. Right? We do need an interpreter at some point, but it's for us because unfortunately we can't sign BSL, right? But it turned out that that was a contribution, whereas in the back of my head, I was thinking, now I have to go and apologize to everyone in this room because I don't sign BSL and I'm not an interpreter. And then I thought, nope, that's not true. This room needs a different kind of expertise. They need to understand how to ask the right questions to a group of deaf people in order to dig into some cultural knowledge that, if we're doing our job right, we don't know already, right? That's the wonderful thing about research. If you got your job right, you're learning something you didn't already know. So being the person who can craft a question turned out to be what my skill set was, and being the person who could provide some consultancy expertise about communication dynamics among deaf individuals in particular was the piece that I was doing. But it wasn't that I played every single role in the room, and that felt like a surprise at the beginning.
Kate, would you say that again? If we're doing it right, we don't know we're working?
Yeah, if we're doing it right, we get surprised at some point by what we find out. There is some research where sometimes, so to answer the question that you posed here, there's, I worked in a research agency, which means that we did contract work for companies that needed a very specific kind of research expertise about disability in the UK. So often they even had their own researchers inside those companies, but they didn't have researchers that were disability specialized. So we would join in their team and we would help them to get work done. And occasionally we would get contracted to do work where everybody on that team knew what the answer to the question was, but there was somebody important within the company who hadn't quite been convinced. So we weren't doing very researchy research. What we were doing was a kind of informed messaging to help persuade. We were doing persuasive work to help the head of the company to get on board to help disabled customers to use their product better. But most of the time, when you're doing a research project that's actually a research project, you don't know what the answer is going to be. And that means that you're going to be, if you've done your job right, there's something surprising that happens at the end. that's the best kind of work. The hearts and minds game is a really important one, and it does especially matter in topics that are critical, like disability inclusion. So if you don't find out a whole lot that's new, but you're able to get someone to understand it from a different perspective, that's great. But you know what's even better is that you actually came in with a real research question, and then you asked people about their experience, and you learned something that you didn't know, and that was a game changer. That's the better outcome.
I love it. If someone's tweeting, well, is anyone tweeting? But that would be a good. If somebody's blue skying, that would be a good quote. Jackson, you've been waiting patiently.
Yeah. So one thing that I guess didn't surprise me and is true to an extent, but that I was, a little nervous about is, and this is coming from, I guess, a theoretical linguistics, academic background a little bit. But, while studying these sort of elegant solutions, these kind of deep, problem solving research that come together in a really, a way that's kind of, lofty and feels intelligent. I always anticipated that would be really different to work, which is, focused much more on kind of pragmatic problem solving. The best answer is the most efficient one, not necessarily the most beautiful one. And that is true to an extent, but I guess one thing that surprised me is that the real value in my work, and I know this, consulting is a problem solving job, but I think every job is a problem solving job, and I think you can tap into this in any career, is that the real value and the things that feel best about doing work is when you can kind of tap into that kind of linguistics mindset of reaching these sort of deep conclusions. And so to answer the question, what surprised me is that there are moments in work where the kind of solutions that I'm coming to, emotionally, it feels the same as the kind of projects that I would do in my linguistics courses or for my master's dissertation, those kind of small aha moments in your research. I guess it surprised me that I feel the same things in work, and it's directly because of that training, and for the messages that you learn in books like Bringing Linguistics to Work, to plug the book, which I absolutely loved, by the way. And yeah. So it was a real lesson in the skills that linguistics do give you are very, very salient. Linguists are, in terms of how our minds work, overqualified for a lot of jobs. So that was a very nice surprise, I'd say.
Thank you, Jackson. And Rebecca.
I feel like I have to contribute now. No, I'm kidding. I think what surprised me the most was something that Kate touched on a little bit, and something that Peace in the chat has asked a little bit about, which is how well linguistics education prepared me for navigating cultural differences. Because I'm originally American, obviously, by my accent. And but I live and work in France, and there is a big cultural divide between my culture and the culture of the people I work with. And I also work with a lot of different other Europeans, mostly Europeans, also some North Africans. And we all come from completely different cultures, and we all have completely different attitudes towards work and towards how formal or informal or deferential or non-deferential one should be in the workplace. And I've found that linguistics helps me notice the differences and be able to adapt easier. Not just to cultural differences in terms of actual border countries, but also in terms of I work for multiple different, I work for the holding company of multiple different subsidiaries, and I work for all of the different subsidiaries at the same time. And each of the different subsidiaries also has a different work culture. And so, for instance, if I'm working with a transport company versus if I'm working with a logistics company, you'd think those would be the same thing, but they're not. And you do have to approach it a bit differently and approach the culture of the people that you work with a bit differently depending on the context that they work in. And this, I think, is something that linguists are already pretty decent at, but linguistics gave me a structure and a format for noticing and then applying these things deliberately, if that makes sense.
I'll leave it there in case anyone wants to jump in.
We have a question in the chat from, well, we had a question in the chat a few minutes ago from Emily when Kate, you were talking, I believe. The question was, did they appreciate that kind of labour? Perhaps I've got the timing on, perhaps you'd like to respond to that, and then we can get to the question that Francis just asked, as I've just seen.
Yes, Emily, they did appreciate that kind of labor. First of all, the consultancy wanted to demonstrate that they were skilled in understanding the contexts around sensory loss specifically. So for me to jump in and say, hey, we can actually make this more efficient. What we need is a skilled deaf facilitator, and it's going to make the meeting flow really well, was something that my consultancy was really happy to have, because they were able to say, look, we've provided for you something that works so much better, and we've left research participants so much happier. So from my immediate employer, they were happy because we were demonstrating some specific disability inclusive knowledge. The client was happy because they were getting the insights they were looking for, which is usually what's happening in these research contexts. They're saying, what don't we know about how deaf people are using our products today? And they could dig into that in a really rich and helpful way if they were having a conversation that wasn't constantly sort of impeded by the slow interpretation process back and forth. So yes, people were happy to have that contribution. And there wasn't, to my great surprise, there wasn't anybody saying, hang on, why are you not the interpreter? Hang on, you didn't do your job. They were happy to have that kind of expertise in that role and then get the outcome they were looking for.
Great. Well, in that case, let's move on to Francis' question, which is, what do you look for in a prospective job? And how did you work out what was important to you to look for in those jobs? Oh, sorry, Anthony, I didn't see your hand. And Jackson, are you referring to this question or what Kate was just saying?
I was just gonna ask Kate a follow-up question about the research you did in the UK. You said 4% said that they didn't have a problem with their public transport system in different cities in the UK. What were the recommendations from that research, if you can share?
Yeah, that was really cool. It turned out that about 4% of blind and partially sighted people said that they didn't have a problem getting where they wanted to go. It turns out, unsurprisingly, the barriers inside public transport for blind and partially sighted people are really significant. So some of the most interesting insights were about communication. I'm not surprised by that. You probably aren't surprised by that. It turns out that there's a pragmatics that blind travelers have, which is that they know that there are some semiotic resources that they have, to use the language of linguists, right? They have a variety of kinds of walking sticks or canes that signal that they are blind, and people are immediately drawn to that, understand that, and offer help. And so if you get really, really lost, you have the opportunity to say, hey, I'm lost. You can just shout it out. You don't have to turn in the direction of anybody in particular. People assume that you're blind. So you just say, hello, I'm lost. And someone will come up and give the assistance that you need. So these are very skilled problem solvers. It's not that they don't have problems. But some of the confidence that people have to learn how to solve those problems is coming through coaching that's coming from institutions for the blind and partially sighted in the UK. And so a little bit of the learnings here were around, this is an issue of confidence and in using particular resources that are available to you. And that can be taught through training. So that was an encouraging outcome. What do we look for in prospective jobs and how do we work out what's important to us? Very quickly, I think it looks like Jackson has an answer to that. What I found was that after working in a consultancy for 3 years, I did nothing but exploratory research. So I did hey, we think there's an interesting topic and we're not quite sure how to explore it yet. So let's go and ask people about what their lives and experience are like. And right when we started to say, something that could really improve people's experiences, the project ended and I jumped onto the next project. And I started to find that I was not scratching this itch of actually following through a project and seeing what happened to the insight, and I wanted to do it. So it took 3 years of being inside a research agency and doing work that I really liked, but eventually saying, hey, how come I'm never getting to do the second phase? And the answer is because you're a consultant and you're not hired for the second phase. That's usually put in-house. So at that point, I started to pivot and look for something in-house. But it wasn't because there was a kind of failure in it. It was that I liked it and then just kept saying, I like it, but I'm still unsatisfied. And there's not one job in this. So it turns out I have the freedom to go and look for another. And Jackson, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, so there are kind of 3 things that I look for looking for a job, and the first one is kind of this sort of integrity of the people at the organization that you're working at. So pragmatically, like, are you going to be okay spending 9 hours a day in potentially a small room with them? Are they good people? Are they kind? Bonus if they're interesting and have varied backgrounds and all those things. And you can kind of suss that out in a few different ways. Looking at people's LinkedIn profiles and especially networking. You're at interview stages, taking notes of what people are like in interviews. Glassdoor reviews, if the company is big enough that people have reviewed things on Glassdoor. So that's one thing. Another thing is kind of similar, the kind of integrity of the kind of product being sold or service or whatever. Why does the organization or business exist? Is it also for reasons that are interesting and have some integrity behind them? So that really drives me. And then the third one, which was maybe the most important one, is kind of looking at what people go on to do from that job and organization afterwards. So LinkedIn's a great tool for this because you can filter, you can like look up the company and then in the filters in the top set it so that you're looking for people whose past company is that one. And or past role is a certain role at a company. And that's really important if you see people who had that job and are going on to do interesting things that you could see yourself doing or that you kind of respect and find interesting. That's a huge green flag. And yes, like the comment in the chat, LinkedIn is a massive it's a great research tool. As much as it is a networking tool, it's a really good research tool. So yeah, those are the things I like to think about.
Let's go to Daniel then. Feel free. You're muted, by the way.
Thank you. I wanted to jump in because I feel like that's part of the reason that I was invited here, being in transition and like what I can talk about, because I am on the market now. And I am asking myself that question currently. When I'm on LinkedIn and I see hundreds of job postings, some subset of which I'm, I guess, qualified for, how do I decide whether it's worth my effort to apply? And I think there's been a lot of great ideas shared. The values is a huge piece of it. There's a lot of resources that talk about, it's like if you know the book, What Color is Your Parachute? Or if you've ever heard of this idea of ikigai, is a Japanese word that people use in a very similar way, where the idea is you need to find something that kind of sits in the intersection of what are your skills, what are your values, where can you make a contribution, and what can you get paid for? Yeah, like the pro bono work that I was talking about before gets me 3 out of 4, right? My skills are there. I feel like I'm making a contribution. It's in line with my values, but it doesn't, it's volunteer work. And so I guess there's different kinds of exercises you can find. The values inventory that Anna Marie posted is one of them. They can help you get clarity on one or another of those. Another thing that I was playing with that I found to be really useful is if you know the idea of an elevator pitch, which I had heard it as something that you use for networking. It's like the image, if you're not familiar with this, is you imagine that you're in an elevator with somebody and you have like until they get to their floor to introduce yourself. So it has to be that brief to explain who you are and what you're doing. And it's kind of a tool that people talk about using at like industry networking events. The template that I had been given was, you want to talk about, it's like a fill in the blank. I help these people do this thing by completing this kind of task, leveraging these skills. I help X do Y, I, Z. And so I was working on my elevator pitch, and I realized, like a lot of writing, it was actually more clarifying for me than anything. Having to get it that succinct was very productive for me. It was kind of like when I went through the exercise of trying to decide what my 3 adjectives are that define what my personal fashion style are. Like, I really need to pare it down and decide exactly what is the thing. And so what I landed on for my elevator pitch for this round on the job market is I help educational institutions build community by designing participatory research and training programs. And I feel like that does touch on my skills, and it also touches on my values. And just to be able to put it in those terms, it means I can look at a job posting and say, does it do those things? The same way as I could look at like a cool orange shirt in a store and say, does it tick these boxes, right? Is that interesting to me? To have like a shorthand to get me there has been really helpful for me. And the process of, yeah, I'm the kind of linguist who helps X do Y because of, that's exactly it.
You did it perfectly, Daniel.
Rebecca, do you have something else to add to that?
Yes, I completely agree with what everyone has said so far in terms of finding your values, what do you want to do, your ikigai. I'm the kind of person that helps people do this by doing this. I completely agree with all of that. However, I would like to offer a different perspective, which is that it's also okay to have no idea what you're doing and to choose a job because there is a completely different factor and it doesn't necessarily align with your values. Now, I'm not saying that's a good long-term solution. It's not. You're going to probably burn out and not have a good time. But when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, I realized that my main goal was not necessarily to figure out my career for the rest of my life. It was to be in France. And so I took the jobs that were available to me that matched my skill set enough. And that one important thing, that I worked with people, because I didn't want to be sitting behind a computer all day doing, not interacting with anyone. But I did those things in order to be able to stay in the country that I had chosen to stay in. So it's, if you're really struggling and you've really spent a lot of time being like, I've thought about it, I really just don't know what I want to do. There's also huge value in just going out and doing something. And then you will eventually, probably by doing stuff and testing stuff out, realize exactly what you like. For example, I've been doing this like teaching, marketing stuff for like 5 years. And it wasn't until last year that I figured out that, what I'm really interested in is sustainability in business. And I'm going to go get my master's in that next year. So it's okay if it takes you, it's okay if like coming out the gate, like, I'm a linguist and I want to do this with my life, and you have goals and you want to go for it and do that. It's also okay to be like, I'm going to be an English teacher for a minute and figure the rest of it out later.
In that case, I'd like to. Oh, Pearl, I see you have a hand. Is this about the question that I asked a little while ago?
Just final point.
Go ahead.
I do agree with all the values and stuff, and this is what I did when I was trying to figure out what kind of jobs that I want to look for. But also echoing with what Rebecca said, is sometimes I do have to take a step back and look at the practicality out of it, because it's kind of like what jobs are available, and also does the job fit your lifestyle. Like everybody has their own circumstances. Maybe you have family commitment, you cannot take a 9-to-5. You're looking for jobs that offer flexible working patterns. You look for jobs that you can work from home some of the time and stuff, or you can be a bit more flexible in your workday. So I think that the flexibility was actually something that I would really cherish in both of my jobs. And if they don't offer flexibility for me to transition from a PhD student right to a job market, it would be very hard for me. So it's just a quick point on also fitting in your lifestyle as well when you look for a job. It may not be the subject area that you're the most interested in, but if it works out, you can give yourself some time and see if you actually want it or not.
Nice one.
Huge.
In that case, I'd like to maybe finish with one final question, Anna Marie, if you think we have time.
Yeah. Do we want to
So
use yours, Tom, or do you have
Yeah.
you have one?
Yeah. No, I think this would be useful. This was sent to me, by the way.
Do it.
What did you do alongside your degree to develop your employability, and which of these things do you think has been most beneficial? I think this is especially important given the early preambles about competitiveness in academic job applications and otherwise. Sometimes it's not enough anymore to have just a PhD. Go ahead, Rebecca.
So I founded and run an open mic night in Paris, which is highly targeted towards the expat community. So we have a lot of English speakers, but we also have just people from all over the world. And I will say that that is probably the #1 way that I have been able to network in my life, because the Paris expat community is tiny. And once you like get in there and start inviting people to things and doing all these things, you start building a real network of people who are going to support you in your job search. So for example, friends that I have made by doing that like community event have helped me work on my CV, have like connected me with their parents who work in the industry that I want to work in, who they, you know, in the process of applying to my master's, I've been like looking into the industry I want to go into. And those people that I, you know, have been able to connect with because of the event that I run have been hugely influential in allowing me to know what that space is like. So get out there and talk to people. It's hugely beneficial.
I was going to say the exact same thing. I don't know what kind of a vibe the word networking gives to our audience today. I know because a lot of my recent experience is with grad students in the US, specifically anthropology grad students in the US, that it sounds a lot like very sort of predatory capitalism. Like networking means I need to go into all of my social relationships thinking about how they can advance my career. And I don't really care about people, I just care about advancing my career. Like some people see it that way. Or to take another example, there's the expression, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And like one side of that coin is that it is about nepotism and people who play favorites and somebody who gets the job over someone who could have done it better because they happen to be, you know, friends with the boss's whatever. And all of that happens, and I don't mean to deny it. I don't mean to minimize it. But also there's another way to look at it. I like to think of networking as a form of mutual aid. It's how we build community. Like community is some people who know each other and do a thing together. And it gets back to what we were saying about collaboration. What makes it more than just me doing a thing, what makes it us doing a thing is that we know about each other and we like work together intentionally and we monitor what each other is doing. None of us is as smart as all of us. And that's why in most industries, we need to work collaboratively. And so the more people that you know, the more potential collaborators that you have, not just because you're trying to get ahead, but also because like you're excited about what you do and they're excited about what you do and you're excited about what they do. And it's good to know each other. And then when the time comes that you need something, they know you and they respect you. And like when I went on LinkedIn 2 months ago and posted, I just lost my job, I had so many people come out of the woodwork and say, let me know what I can do to help you. And that was so validating. And it's like, it's good for the soul, right? Like that's my community. I really believe in community building. It's part of my elevator pitch, but it's also part of how I go through this process. And so it's like employability is an interesting word because it's not really about like me building my skills in some kind of a like neoliberal sense of like improving the character sheet of my video game avatar so that it does more damage per second. But it's really about like developing myself as a member of a community. And then I bring all of that with me wherever I can find work.
Yeah, Pearl, Kate, Jackson, who wants to go?
I have to say that I did not do anything deliberately for my employability, but then I did have a part-time job alongside with my study just because I do need the extra cash. But it's really echoing what everybody is saying, that you need to get in touch with your community, because my part-time job was working as a play worker for a playground for disabled children. They are all in a very severe end of autism, so it's one-to-one support there. And that job really got me into looking at what the living in London is like. I'm not in the ivory tower of the university. I'm in touch with the local, and that really helped me when I was applying for jobs that looking at social research, because I do have a bit of social care experience in that sense, and I can speak about something in the society. It's not just put me a bit of a step ahead of just an international student who may not know anything about where I'm living in. So just echoing community.
Yeah, I also wanted to jump in and echo those same thoughts, and also say that this job that I'm currently in, which is my first job post university degrees, is I didn't network to get this job. It was a random application that ended up working out because my now manager likes linguistics, resonated with it as an analytical degree. So those things all did very much work out. However, the value of networking is becoming incredibly apparent to me the more I'm working. And Daniel, I really liked the way you put that sort of moral dilemma and dichotomy, and it's a great conversation to have. And there are so many ways to look at it. But one thing, kind of echoing your thoughts and what everyone else is saying, is that a lot of my most successful networking has been by kind of making friends. The people who I've met who I relate to, and kind of want to bring them into my world, and they want to do the same because we just like each other and get along. That has led to some really, really interesting opportunities in the last couple of years. And it's something that you especially see in consulting. A lot of people that end up in consulting, and especially some of the bigger larger consultancies, end up kind of never applying to a job again. They get their next role purely through their network. And that can sometimes be a pretty, powerful track to be on, but that's also quite rare. But still, there are some lessons to be learned about the place that genuine friends that you make can take you to some pretty interesting places. And I think if you're also thinking about the sort of morals of it, there's a chance that you're doing it the right way. That's, I think, yeah, all the likelihood is there.
Yeah, just to follow that up, it can be hard to feel like you're making a genuine friendship every time you go into an info interview with someone. Informational interviewing. If that term isn't familiar already, it means somebody passed you the name of somebody who does something that could be not even remotely what you want to do, but is kind of interesting. So you have a chat with them and you get to know a little bit about them. And there's somebody you've met now and you might be able to talk to in the future. You might not feel like you have an immediate spark, or they might be your best friend, but I'll tell you that in an info interview recently, somebody said, "Hey, this cane begonia." When this piece behind me is down, there's a bunch of plants behind me in my kitchen, and they said, "Why is your cane begonia living? Because why is mine dead?" And so then we took 10 minutes to talk about how to take care of a spotted begonia. And this person became my plant friend. But as it happens, this person is incredibly well connected within a community of government researchers, and I've been really interested in a role in government. And so recently when a job came out, I was able to sincerely say, instead of it being like, "Oh God, I've got to go back to this person and we don't even know each other," I said, "How's your begonia?" She said, "Oh, it's doing really well based on what you told me to do." And then I said, "Oh, so-and-so seems to be hiring inside government digital services. Do you know that person?" She said, "Yeah, I'll make an introduction." So there is this piece of it that you do need to ask in some cases. You need to be willing to put yourself out there and say, I'm wondering if I can meet this person and have a good conversation with them. And any little piece of it that allows you to have a genuine connection makes that process so much less daunting and makes you feel like, I don't feel fearful to talk to this person anymore because they killed their plant and they don't want to do it again. So we've bonded, right? Whatever it is that is your moment like that can really make a difference in how you communicate in the future too.
Okay, nice one. I think I'd like to open up to the last possibility for questions from anybody in the audience. I appreciate that it's a little bit daunting and maybe you didn't come with questions and you just wanted to listen. I'm sure you're all united by your shared experience of being perhaps slightly unsure or intimidated about the job market. I hope we've been able to assuage some of those anxieties. So if anybody else has any other questions while I'm just sort of saying random words in the hopes that another chat message will come along, then I think it might be time to thank our panel and Anne-Marie for bringing them all together. We're really appreciative and this has been extremely useful. Thanks very much. Oh, I just saw a hand. Was that a... No, that wasn't. That might have been a misclick. I'm going to assume that was a misclick. Yes. Okay. Well, thanks so much for being here. Would you like to share any details about how people can find you or get in touch with you in case they would want to sort of, you know, have your job or something? It'd be nice to be able to connect with you. Basically, you just sort of mentioned some online presence or something. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn and just send me an invite and connect. Yeah, as I said earlier, I'm interested in research administration. I'm just trying to start up some research thing where I work now and moderate that. So I'm going to build up my experience and then go forward from there.
Nice one. Okay. I see people posting their LinkedIns in the chat. I'll give people a few minutes to do that and/or they can connect. I hope you get many new friends, everybody. That's what this is all about. Friends you want nothing from. Of course, that's the most important thing. Well, yes, if you want to stay and ask any questions, you're more welcome. Otherwise, you know, anybody is feel free to leave whenever you like. Basically, I'll be just hang around for a few more minutes just in case anybody does have any questions.
Tom, didn't you have some announcements?
That will come. Save that for another time.
Another time?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
I just want to say, it's like to wrap up the whole networking thing. Feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn. So many people have helped me in my job search, in my career, questioning, and I would love to pay that forward. So super open. I think everyone on this panel agrees.
And I never get to talk to linguists anymore. So
True.
Please reach out. Also, Anthony, I just have to mention that my office is literally 20 feet away from the National Portrait Gallery. I'm right across the road. And it always feels strange being so close to somebody else in London when it's so huge.
Yeah, feel free to come in. It's free entry, except for the 2 exhibitions, but most of it is free. It's open every day. We open late on Friday and a Saturday until 10 to 9. We open at 10:30 in the morning. Yeah, so feel free to come in. Yeah, hope to see you there.
I go on my lunch sometimes. It's maybe my favorite museum in London. It's an amazing museum.
Okay, I think people are starting to filter out now, so I'm going to head off myself. I see Pearl needs to go as well. I'd like to see you all, and I look forward to seeing your posts on LinkedIn.
Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Bye.